We're joined here by Her Excellency European Union Ambassador to the UAE, Lucie Berger, to discuss EU-UAE relations as well as other major regional developments. Ms. Ambassador, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
And thank you for having me.
So first of all, I want to start with EU-UAE relations. It's been over a decade since the delegation was established here in the United Arab Emirates. How would you characterize EU-UAE relations at the moment, and what are the main priorities when it comes to bilateral diplomatic engagement?
Well, thank you for this question. Of course, this is the most important question for me as the ambassador representing the European Union here in the United Arab Emirates. I have to say that we are really experiencing an exponential growth and flourishing in the cooperation between EU and the UAE. In the past, we might have missed a few opportunities, but over the last few years, we've really seen a new energy, a new dynamism in this bilateral cooperation. Since my arrival here, I've really assisted to so many high-level engagements, frequent visits. There are regular exchanges at the highest level between our presidents and leaders. And I believe that these exchanges have actually built a better understanding between EU and the UAE, and also trust. So we are now at the level where the understanding is good, maybe still not perfect, we're still learning, but I can already say that based on that, we clearly share a vision that strategic partnerships and strong partnerships are very important, and that the EU-UAE should be such a strategic and strong partnership, especially in this context of quite turbulent times, maybe in politics.
And a main point in this strategic and strong relationship, I guess, is the announcement that was recently made that free trade talks would begin between the UAE and the EU. Can you tell us a little bit about the timing of this and what sort of time frame we can expect? Because obviously it comes at a time of a fracture in global trade and uncertainty over US tariff policy. So anything you can share with us in terms of why now and what can be expected?
We need strong and reliable partners, as I said, and we see UAE as one of them. We do want a strategic partnership, and we're actually looking into also launching negotiations that would include other areas beyond trade. But of course, trade is an essential part of our collaboration. Trade has been doing well without the free trade agreement, but we think we are at the moment where actually we want to boost our exchanges. I'll give you an example. The EU member states jointly are actually the top investor in the Gulf. And of the EU foreign direct investment in the region, 70% is actually targeting the UAE. UAE at the same time is one of the leading investment partners in the EU. This is our top export market destination in the region. So it is very natural that we want to see trade liberalization and investment facilitation from both sides. In terms of timing, we've worked at technical level trying to see what can be done at the bilateral level. We've decided that there are two avenues we want to pursue. One is a strategic partnership agreement where we can look into areas that are beyond trade, artificial intelligence, digital cooperation, security, regional stability, judicial cooperation, research and education, all of these areas. But of course, trade remains a cornerstone of our relationship, and that's why a trade agreement, a free trade agreement, makes a perfect sense. It makes even more sense in the current context where there are considerable shocks on the multilateral trading system.
And when can we expect to sort of see the outcomes of these talks or the effects of these talks?
That's a question I have myself. On our side, I can tell you that we haven't started negotiating yet. The European Commission, together with our member states, are currently looking into all the procedures to be done before we can actually launch the negotiations. I am hoping for an early start, of course, of the negotiations. Now, in the EU, the free trade agreement negotiations in the past have taken several years, and we're obviously hoping that's not going to be the case. And from what I've seen, both sides are committed to moving this as quickly as possible and to start as soon as possible. So let's hope for the best.
Yeah, hopefully. And can you tell us a bit about how these talks will differ from the wider EU GCC talks? And will this provide an opportunity to perhaps revive those or push those forward?
Well, I think the difference is that the EU GCC, it's a regional agreement with 6 countries, whereas the EU UAE can be maybe a more detailed one because it's a bilateral agreement. I think they should be for sure complementary, and we haven't given up on the idea of an EU GCC free trade agreement. On the contrary, we hope that our focus and our collaboration with UAE and the growing collaboration also with the other Gulf states will hopefully help us to also inject more energy and dynamism in the regional negotiations.
Are individual EU member states also seeking similar economic agreements with the UAE, or will it largely remain at EU level?
So the EU member states cannot conclude trade agreements. That's an exclusive competence of the European Commission, and this is where actually you only see EU trade agreements. They do, however, sign a lot of business collaboration agreements or specific investments. And I also think that we've seen an exponential growth of such agreements in both directions. A lot of investment agreements and announcements going into Italy, France, most recently data centers, artificial intelligence, but also many other member states. They're really looking into how to boost the business, which boosts the trade, the investment flows. So it's in a way a complementary relationship. Their agreements are more targeted, it's more concrete projects, whereas we're trying to set the environment, the business environment, investment environment at a level where it makes everything easier.
Now, moving a bit away from trade, obviously, it's a very important time for the European Union, given developments as war rages on in Ukraine as well. But before we get into that, I know an important date is coming up for the EU. So if you'd like to go into that a bit.
Absolutely, and thank you for pointing this out. On the 9th of May every year, we celebrate the Europe Day. It's something like our national day of the European Union. We mark the declaration of Robert Schuman, who was a French politician, who for the first time in European history spoke about this vision of united Europe. And while everyone knows that, or many people know, that European Union actually started by economic collaboration in sectors like steel and coal, in fact, before that, there was already a vision that this economic collaboration should bring us to a political union. And that was voiced by Robert Schuman on the 9th of May, 1950. So that's what we mark every year. It's the Europe Day, and we will be celebrating with our friends and colleagues here in UAE as well.
Definitely a union that a lot of other countries in the continent are seeking to join, especially going back to Ukraine, where the war has been going on for more than 3 years now. How does the EU see the UAE's engagement with both Russia and Ukraine? And is it viewed as an asset that perhaps the EU could capitalize on? Because, of course, the UAE has been involved in mediation between the two, as well as prisoner swaps. So how does the bloc view that?
It's obviously a great opportunity. But let me start by saying that the European Union absolutely wants peace. Our member states want peace, and Ukraine wants peace. We've all accepted the ceasefire, and it is our view that Russia actually is the engine behind the war, and that they actually have proven that they're not that interested in peace, especially because of having seen the most deadly attack in April during what we hoped would be a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. In this context, the UAE has done really commendable work. They have mediated exchanges of prisoners of war. I think around 3,000 prisoners of war have been able to actually come home thanks to these mediation efforts. We've seen also a lot of engagement on humanitarian aid. in particular for families and children, orphans, trying to help children to continue with their education. It's very important. We all know youth is actually really the future of a country, and investing in the youth is important. President Zelensky visited UAE, and a lot of discussion around, of course, ceasefire, peace, but also humanitarian aid took place during this visit. And lastly, we've also witnessed the signature of the UAE-Ukraine CEPA, which again can bring prosperity to Ukraine back, especially post-conflict. So this work is absolutely commendable, and it's a very positive contribution. We've also seen other engagement from the Gulf states, back channel talks. Other Gulf states also engage in that. So as we are building a strategic partnership with the UAE, I think it would be interesting to look into trying to convince Russia to respect territorial integrity of Ukraine and to come to the table and really start seriously talking about peace.
And speaking of that, beyond humanitarian assistance and mediation and prisoner exchanges, is there coordination between the EU and the UAE or other Gulf states when it comes to diplomatic strategies to end the war in Ukraine?
I mean, of course, there is engagement. We discuss these issues, but as you know, currently the mediation efforts, there have been some initiatives that are not exactly European Union led. We hope for the best. We hope for peace. We really hope for an early resolution to this conflict, and any role that we can play positively as the European Union or as UAE or jointly as strong partners is welcome.
I'm glad you mentioned that about European-led initiatives previously, because that brings me to my next question. Does the EU see Gulf mediation in general, ranging from Ukraine to Iran currently, as a sort of competing channel when it comes to mediation, or as a complementary diplomatic channel, especially when it comes to these areas such as Ukraine and Iran, which used to be European-led previously?
Absolutely complementary. And I think if I use the example of Iran, I think that it is absolutely important that the Gulf states are in the lead or basically among the leaders when it comes to engagement with Iran. If you look at the strategic partnership for the Gulf, which was published by the European Union in 2022, you will find there a recognition that it is the Gulf states that know their neighbors the best, and that we need to work on a strategy how to overcome certain difficulties in the region with the Gulf states in particular. So in this context, of course, the normalization that the UAE has pioneered with Iran, but also, for example, with Israel, is absolutely commendable. We need to keep the channels open, and we need to find a way through these channels how we can progress and how we can improve the situation. So it is definitely a complementary. There's no competition. There's really no competition for us. Or in a way, we would like to not be the one who brings the peace if the peace comes earlier. So in a way, it should be maybe a competition who will be first, but it's a positive one, and we would welcome it.
Speaking of the negotiations taking place with Iran, we've had three rounds of talks so far between the US and Iran. One in Rome, the other is in Muscat. And what's been interesting is seeing that it's Iran that is also very open and positive towards having European involvement in these negotiations, and has asked for talks with the E3 countries. What could you tell us about what the UK, France, Germany, or largely the EU is seeking when it comes to the new negotiations that are taking place, or from a potential new nuclear deal?
Well, we are not in the lead of these negotiations. What we welcome, and I already spoke about it, is that there is, of course, engagement from the Gulf states, because we find it absolutely it's important for the Gulf states to be in the lead and to be at the table. Of course, European Union also should be at the table, one of the reasons being that there are sanctions implied. Why Iran wants to have the European countries at the table is maybe also the reason that we have actually remained part of the deal that was actually agreed a couple of years ago with the assistance of the European Union. And from our part, we can build on that deal, or there can be a new one that the United States maybe has in mind. But it has to address more than just communication channels and renewed relationship building. There is accountability, there is a bigger picture. We don't want to see more proxy wars in the region. We don't want to see frozen conflicts. We really want to see shared prosperity, if I can use actually the policy of the United Arab Emirates. We want this to be a start of a shared prosperity in the region.
And given what you said about the Gulf states also being more involved, and that it's good that they're more involved when it comes to the talks, as opposed to the case in 2015 when the first nuclear deal was signed, do you think that the Gulf states should have more of a say beyond mediation roles, but actually have a say in the terms of the deal and what happens? Because obviously it has a huge impact on the Gulf, but also on the wider region.
I certainly hope that they do have a say.
Could the EU and Gulf states partner more when it comes to talks with Iran? Or is it something that's approached?
I think we are, to be honest. I think we are. So again, with the strategic partnership for the Gulf, we've started looking into the security collaboration, regional stability. Our EU Special Representative for the Gulf region has invested a lot of efforts in this area. He held 2 already EU GCC structured dialogue on security. And of course, this is part of the conversation. It's not the only one. We also talk about cybersecurity, maritime security, different aspects of security. But of course, it's part of the conversations. And I don't think it's a question of whether we should, but what can we do together to make things better?
If possible, could you tell us more about what these sort of talks or agreements when it comes to maritime security? Of course, the European Union is playing a very important role when it comes to the Red Sea.
Well, I hope that the maritime security has been a positive experience in the region. Actually, when we speak about security, it's not exact. The European Union does not naturally come on your mind. But we've been working on changing this. Defense and security has also grown in importance in the EU internally, in the context, of course, of the Russian Federation aggression against Ukraine, and now even more so because of, let's say, the proliferation of conflicts around us. And we do have shared neighborhoods, so these conflicts are actually important for us also jointly. On maritime security, we had a very positive experience with a operation in the Strait of Hormuz, which was an EU member state-led operation, but it was a monitoring mission actually in this very region. And building on that, we also launched the Operation Aspides, which is a defense mechanism that is helping to preserve the freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. And I believe that until now, or it's been some 14 months, I think, of this operation, Operation Aspides has accompanied around 700 vessels through the Suez Canal, which I think is an important contribution to global trade. The Red Sea and the Suez Canal, of course, is a major hub for global trade. And it's not important only for the European Union, it's important globally. So I hope that this is actually a testimony that the European Union can be a reliable and also important player in maritime security. And these are part of the conversations that we're having and how to work together to build on that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your great answers. And thank you for taking the time to join us, Ms. Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again.